We begin today the Gemara on Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis, 10 lines up from the bottom of the Amud where it says V'kama Yehei Beineyen. This is going back to what we learned before. In the Mishnah it says that if you sell 3 trees in a property, then the buyer gets not only the trees, but he also gets the karka, the ground below the trees, between the trees and around the trees for the use of these trees. Because when he buys 3 trees, that's understood that he's buying an orchard, not just individual trees. Okay, so here the Gemara discusses how are these trees planted? How much space is there in between them that you understand that this is an orchard? The kama yehei beneyan. How much space is there between the trees in this kind of sale that we say that he gets the karka as well? So the Rashbam says, we had this already before also in the Gemara, if these trees are too tightly, they're very close to one another, so then that's not called an orchard. That's like a forest. That it's not made to be planted that way. You're going to uproot them. If they're spread out, so then it's also not a proper orchard. So what exactly is that size, that space between them that we say that you get the karka? Rav Yosef, Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel, me'arba ames vat shmein ames. It's the space between the trees from 4 ames until 8 ames. Now, if it's 8 ames or more, then it's already too distant from one another, and it's not considered to be a proper orchard. And it's like individual trees, and you don't get the karka as well. Rava Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Mishmayna va'at sheishesre. Now it starts from 8 ames. If there's 8 ames of space until 16 ames, then that's the space that it's considered to be a proper orchard. But if it's from 16 or more, then it's not considered to be a proper orchard. It's too spread out. Okay, so the Gemara is going to go through now a lengthy discussion in explaining this argument, this shear of either 4 to 8 or from 8 to 16. Amalei Abai le Rav Yosef. So Abai says to Rav Yosef, Lo tifloi galei de Rav Nachman. Don't argue on the shear that Rav Nachman said that it's until 16 amas. Because the Tnan Masnisen Kavasei. We learned in the Mishnah that says, like the opinion of Rav Nachman, that a proper orchard, or as we'll see over here, he's saying regarding a vineyard, that what makes it a vineyard is when it's vines that are planted together and there's a space up to 16 amas between them. Because the Tnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Neteyas Karmoi Sheshes Rama al Sheshes Rama. When a person plants his vineyard and there's 16 amas between the rows of the vineyard, up until 16 amas. So then, Mutter lohavi zera lasham, you're allowed to bring zera in that place, and if it's planted, there is a space, not up to. Sorry, there's a space of 16 amas between them. Okay, so then you're allowed to bring zera. You're allowed to bring other seeds to plant vegetables there in between the rows of the vineyard. Okay, and the reason is because once there's a space of 16 amas between one row and the other, so then it's not considered to be like one vineyard where you're not allowed to plant there, and it's considered to be separate, and therefore you can come and plant in between. So just like you see this halacha regarding klayim, so just like this halacha applies here regarding klayim, that once there's 16 amas of space between them, you can plant in between vegetables. So the same thing we understand over here, that what this means is that when you have these trees or vines that are so far from each other, 16 amas, so that it's considered to be separate from one another, and it's not one large orchard that the buyer would get the karka as well. Amar Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda said about this as well, based on this Mishnah here, Maisa b'tzalmoin be'echad. There was a story with a person in the place called Tzalmoin. Shenotas karmoi sheshes ama al sheshes ama. He planted his vineyard with the space of 16 amas between the rows, and now you have the branches of the vines that stick out. Now v'hoya hoifech seyar shtei shuris l'tzad echad. So he would take the seir, literally means here, but over here it means the vines, the branches of the vineyard. He would take them and he would turn them away from these rows, and v'zereya sanir, and he would plant that area that was plowed in between. Okay, so what this is speaking about is when you have a bunch of rows that of the vines, so in between you have empty space. So what he would do in one year is they would take the branches of the vine and turn it to one direction, which makes space on one side to be able to plant there. But meanwhile, the branches of the vine are turned to the other direction where you don't have that space of 16 amas to plant. And then l'shon acheres, in the following year, and then that area which you left empty because all the branches of the vine were in that area. So then the following year, they would they would take the branches and turn them away to the other direction to be able to plant in that area that was kept empty and not planted the year before. So you see over here that as long as you have the space of 16 amas between the vines and you move away the branches, that it should be that space of 16 amas, that is fine. And this story that how this person was doing it was brought in front of the Chachamim, and they said that it's allowed because there's 16 amas of space in between. So this story is a source for the fact that we paskin like what it says in this Mishnah, that the 16 amas in between is what allows you to be able to plant over there. Okay, so that's the question that Abaya asks Rav Yosef, that here you have a Mishnah that says this space. Malay, so Rav Yosef answers back, Ano lo yadaina. I don't know about this Mishnah. He meant to say, of course he knew about the Mishnah, but he meant to say we don't paskin like that Mishnah. Ella uvde have. There was another story where the halacha was paskin differently, and that was Bedura de Rausa. This was in a village or in a city where there were shepherds, and over there, what happened? Someone sold a property. He sold 3 trees to his friend, and there was only 8 amas in between, like the opinion that Rav Yosef said. And Vasal Kamei de Rav Yehuda, they came to ask Rav Yehuda about this, whether the buyer in such a case gets the karka as well. V'amalei, and he told him, Ziv havle kimloi bakar v'kelov, that if it's a case that you have in between the trees the size for the oxen that plow to pass through with the yoke that it passes through and the kalim that it passes through, so then that's the amount that we say that it's considered to be a normal orchard, and you have to give him the karka as well. Now, v'loi have a yedaina, I didn't know when he paskened this, that it's the space of the oxen to walk through. Kimloi bakev v'kelov kama. How much space is that? But then, when I heard this, that it says in a Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah here earlier in this Masechta, that it says regarding neighbors, adam ilon samach l'stecha veirai, that you shouldn't plant your tree near your friend's field, elam kain hichik mimenu dal damas, unless you distance your tree or your vineyard from your friend's property 4 amas. And what's the reason for this? Why can't you plant all the way up to the border? The Tani Allah and Abraisa, we learned that explains that Mishnah, that when you have to distance from your neighbor's property 4 amas, that's in order to have space for you to bring your oxen to walk there and to do the work that you shouldn't end up going into your friend's property. If you're going to be right on the border and then you're going to have to work and bring your oxen to go there, you're going to end up going into your friend's property. So now, after I heard this psak din, Rav Yosef says, Amino, I said, Shma mino, kimloi bakev v'kelov, is dal damas. So the amount of space that there is between the trees that he mentioned over there was how much? It's 4 amas. That's the minimum amount of space that's needed to be able to work in an orchard between trees. So therefore, it's from 4 amas until 8 amas. Whereas according to the other opinion, which is Rav Nachman, it's the space of from 8 amas until 16 amas. The Gemara is soon going to explain more of the details of this space of from 4 to 8 and from 8 to 16. Okay, but now the Gemara says, so Abaye brought a Mishnah in Masechta Klayim that seems to be saying like the opinion of Rav Nachman. What does Rav Yosef answer him? Rav Yosef says, we don't paskin like that Mishnah, but I can tell you of a story where Rav Yehuda paskin that the space of between the trees begins by 4 amas, not from 8 to 16, but from 4 to 8. So now the Gemara says, Rav Yosef, miloit nan, don't we have in the Mishnah also an opinion that says, like Rav Yosef, that it starts from 8 amas and it goes till 16 amas? And here the Gemara brings, this is the end, the Seifa of the Mishnah that was quoted before in Masechta Klayim. In that Mishnah itself, it says another opinion. Rab Meir, Rab Shimon Oimrim, Rab Meir, Rab Shimon say, Haniteyas karmai shmoin amas, someone that plants his vineyard, and there's 8 amas of space. Shmoin amas or shmoin amas, meaning that there's space of 8 amas between each row. Then mutter lahavi zera l'sham. In that space of 8 amas in between, you can bring your zera and plant it over there. So in that very Mishnah, there's the Tanakama. The Tanakama says 16 amas of space, and the next, but Meir and Rab Shimon say 8 amas of space. So Rab Yosef was paskening like Rab Meir and Rab Shimon, that 8 amas, that's the amount, that's the maximum space that there is. Once you have 8 amas, then it's already considered to be separated from one another, which means that from 4 until 8 amas, that's the normal amount for a vineyard to have space between the rows. So why is the Gemara before saying that we have a Mishnah that supports what Rav Nachman said, if we also have a clear Mishnah in the Sefer, the other opinions that support what Rav Yosef said. So the Gemara says, Afila hachi maisa odif. Abaye that asked the question of Rav Yosef, because there was the story in the city of Tzalmoin where all the Chachamim were matter in the case of 16 amas dafke, so therefore he's following that story that it's dafke 16 amas and no less than 16 amas. Okay, but now here the Gemara is going to explain the space. So according to Rav Nachman, we said it's from 8 to 16, and according to Rav Yosef, it's the space from 4 to 8. What exactly is this space here? So the Gemara, Bishleim Rav Yosef.
Double the other.
Yeah, understand, right. Yeah. But the Gemara is going to explain the source from it, because in the Mishnah that it quoted here with the opinions, we only saw the maximum of the space, because it said either the space has to be 16 or the space has to be 8. But why is he saying from 8 to 16 or from 4 to 8? Where does that come from? So the Gemara now explains. Bishleim Rav Yosef, I'll leave it at Rav Shimon. According to Rav Yosef, he's following Rav Shimon's opinion. Shamina le mufuzarin v'shamina le retzufin. We can see from what Rav Shimon said in the Mishnah, this more spread out space, which is the 8 amas, up to 8 amas, is considered to be the space of a vineyard. And we also see the closest space that the minimum is 4 amas. And the Gemara here says, mufuzarin hodam modan. The space of 8 amas is that Mishnah Klein that we just quoted, that it says up until 8 amas. Ritzufin, where do we see that the minimum amount is 4 amas? Because Etnan, there's another Mishnah that says, Kerem hanatua al pachas medal damis. When you have a vineyard that's planted and there's less of 4 amas of space between one vine and another, einay kerem. It doesn't have the halacha of a vineyard. Divrei Rab Shimon, this is what Rab Shimon says. Because it's planted this way, it's not supposed to be planted so tightly and close together, because you can't walk in between, you can't do the work there. So it's going to be uprooted. So therefore it doesn't have the regular halacha of a kerem, and therefore regarding klaim, it also has different halachas. The halacha of distancing zera, any vegetables that you plant, if you're distancing it from a single vine, so over there you have to distance it much less, either 3 tfachim or 6 tfachim. When you have to distance zrayim from a whole vineyard, over there you have to distance it 4 amas. So over here, this is not a kerem. This is because it's planted too close together. So you see over here, what's the shear? 4 amas. Less than 4 amas is already not considered to be a regular vine. The Chachamim say even if it's planted so close together, it is a vineyard. The vines in the middle, where it's very close together, we consider it as if it's not there, because it's going to be uprooted. So it's as if it was already uprooted. So you see here clearly, according to Rab Shimon, that the space of the rows between one vine and another, and the same by trees, is from 4 amas, like it says in this Mishnah, and 8 amas, like the Mishnah that we quoted before from Klein. However, according to Rav Nachman, I'll leave with the Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan's opinion, mufuzarin shaminanle. The Mishnah we quoted before, the Chachamim say that it's only from 16 amas that it's considered to be separated from one another. Anything less than 16 amas is considered to be that it's a vine, that a vineyard, that it's all one vineyard. But ritzufin mishaminanle. How low down in the number, how close together could it be that you say that it's still considered to be a regular vineyard? That we don't see that Chachamim said anything about that. So the Gemara says, Enachanami. The Chachamim never said anything clearly about this. But svarahu. But nevertheless, Rav Nachman said logically that middle Rab Shimon, Palge, since we see according to Rab Shimon, the space of the rows is from 8 to 4, so Rabbanan Ami Palge. According to the Rabbanan as well, if we see that he said that the maximum space is 16, that means that the minimum space between them is 8. So that's the machlokes here regarding the space. Now, Omar Rave, on this Rave says, well, how do we paskin? We actually take the combination of both opinions. Hilchase, the halacha is, Mei Arba Ames, from the space of 4 ames, V'ad Sheish Esre, until 16 ames, that's the space that's considered to be the space that it's still considered to be a vineyard or an orchard, from 4 ames until 16 ames. Okay, so the Rashbam here says that he's paskening like the Rabbanon, because the Rabbanan said that up until 16 ames is still considered to be the regular space in a vineyard, but he says all the way down to 4 ames, because we never find clearly that Chachamim said what's the minimum space. So therefore, instead of saying the svara, before the Gemara said a svara, that just like Rab Shimon said that it's half, so too according to the Chachamim, but Rava didn't accept that svara. Rava said that according to the Chachamim, it's all the way from 4 ames till 16 ames, that's the space in between the trees or a vineyard.
And smaller than that would be a yard.
Right, it's like a forest that the trees have to be uprooted, so it's not a regular orchard. So when you sell, you don't say that you get karka because it's not considered to be that you sold an orchard.
So why don't we say according to Rabbanan, it's an extra big share of 16, so a smaller than 8 would be a yard.
That's the svara the Gemara said before, Tarke. That was the svara the Gemara said, but the Rava didn't accept that svara because we never find the Chachamim ever said that beferish. Tanya kava say the Rava. Now there's a brayso that says clearly like Rava. How close can trees be that it's still considered to be a regular orchard? Arba amas, the space of 4 amas between them. And how distant can trees be from each other? And they should still be considered a orchard. Sheish esra, up till 16 amas. And then, in such a case, from 4 to 16, when you acquire 3 trees, you acquire the ground as well with the trees, and the trees that are in between. And therefore, in such a case, the halach is, if the tree dries up, or it was cut down, he has karka there that he can replant there. But if it's pachas mikan, if it's less than 4 amas of space between the trees, or yeser al kan, or it's more than the space of 16 amas between the trees, he didn't buy the 3 trees at once. He bought 1 tree, then another, then another. Then he doesn't acquire the karka as well, and not the trees in between. If the tree dries up by niktzatz or it was cut down, he does not get the karka. He can't replant the trees there because he only acquired the trees and not the karka. Okay, so this is the conclusion of the space in between the trees for it to be considered an orchard. So now the Gemara says, how do you measure the space? Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the Shaila, when you're measuring the space from one tree to another tree, do you measure it from the part of the tree which is narrow? That's where you measure. You're measuring from the trunk of the tree, but do you measure from the area of the trunk of the tree where it's narrower, so it's going to come out to be more space? Or you measure from the part of the trunk of the tree which is wider, so you have less space in between the trees. Amalei Rav Gvia mibei Kosel, Rav Gvia from the city Kosel answered, Ravashi told Ravashi, Toshema, I'll bring you a raya from what it says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, regarding the space in a vineyard, when it comes to a vine, which is called rechuva because this is an older vine, which is you graft into it from a branch of a younger vine. So eina maided, when you're measuring the space between one vine and another, so how do you measure? Eina maided ela me'ikar hasheni. You measure from the second part of what grows. When it grows, so there's the first part that grows that's thicker, that's wider. And then when you go further up, it gets narrower. So where do you measure? You measure from right in the middle, ikar hasheni, which means somewhere in the middle, which is basically the medium-sized part. And it's not from the thin, not from the thick, but somewhere in the middle, that's the way you measure it. And the same thing here regarding a sale. When you want to measure to see how far one tree from another, you measure from that middle part. Another shaila, Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah, Machaloi Shloisha Badei Ilon Mahu. What if you sell a tree? We had this point already before in the Gemara. You sold one tree, but one tree has 3 branches that come out of it, and those 3 branches, the earth got filled up there, and therefore each branch is when it comes out of the ground, it looks like a separate tree. And not only that, because the earth was raised up above these branches, so therefore each branch in their place takes root in their area. So now it's really branches of one tree, but it became like 3 separate trees. Mahu, what's the halach in this case? Is it considered to be 3 trees or 1 tree? Amalei Rav Gvia mibei Kosel. So again, Ravashi answered that I told Ravashi, Toshema, the Mishnah says, Hamavrich Gimel Gefanim. When a person grafts 3 trees, or 3 vines that is, Vikreyem nirin. So you took the branches of a vine and you put it into the ground, and in order for it to grow a separate vine, and there's separate roots that each one of them, you see each one is separate, even though it all comes from the same vine. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik says, Im yesh beinayim midal damas v'at shmeina, if there's space from 4 to 8 amas between one branch that you now put into the ground and another, this is following the opinion of Rab Shimon we had before, that the space is from 4 to 8, mitzdarfen. So then it combines to be one vineyard with these 3 vines. Vimlav, if you don't have that space, then a mitzdarfen, then it won't combine. So you see over here that if it has the proper space, even though it's branches that originate from one vine or from one tree, but now that it got planted separately, or it has earth that's covering these branches separately, it's considered to be it's like separate trees. Another shaila boyer of pape machal shnayim betoich sadeu. What happens if you're selling trees? So we're talking here about selling 3 trees. When you buy 3 trees, you get the karka as well. But what's if 2 trees you sold was in your property? The echad ala metzer, and the 3rd tree is not on the property itself. It's on the border, and the border of the property is not on the same level as the rest of the property. The border is either a little higher or lower, but it's in a different level. So it's not mamish 3 trees together. So what's the halach in such a case? Or another example, shnayim metoich shaloi. You sold 2 trees that are in your property, and then there's another property right next door to yours, and you bought off your neighbor a portion and an area with a tree in his property. And now you're selling to someone the 2 trees in your property and another tree which is in that other portion of the property from your neighbor that you bought. So it's not really 3 trees in one property. So what's the halach in such a case? Does the buyer get karka as well or not? Because it's not considered to be 3 trees in one property. Teiku, these 2 iboyes are not resolved. Another shaila about this, the Gemara asks, boyer of Ashi. Rav Ashi asked the shaila, boyer that is mahu. What's the halacha with a pit that's in between these properties over here? So the Rashbam here says that the shaila is, if in the previous cases we're going to say that the fact that it's on a metzer, it's on the border, or there's another tree in the other property, that's not a hefsik, and it's considered to be 3 trees that you sold, and therefore the buyer gets property. What's if there's a pit with water that separates 2 trees from the 3rd tree? Is that a hefsik? Ma'osha tafsik. Does that create a separation between this tree and the other 2 trees? Further, he asked, Ama Samayim, Ma'osha Tafsik. So if you're going to say, this is how the Rashbam explains the Gemara here, if you're going to say that a pit of water, that's not considered to be a hefsik. But how about if it's a stream of water that's separating 1 tree from the other 2 trees? Is that considered to be a hefsik? Further, he asked, Rishus harabim, Mahu. If you're going to say that the stream of water is not a hefsik, but maybe if you have a pathway for the rabbim to pass through here, is that considered to be a hefsik? So the Rashbam explains the kind of Rishus harabim we're talking about over here is only a Rishus harabim from the space of 4 amas up to 16 amas. But if it's a proper Rishus harabim, like you find by Shabbos, that it's 16 amas wide, that's definitely considered to be a hefsik. And then further he asked, even if you're going to say that this Rishus harabim is not a hefsik, Richva de dikla maho. What's if there is a row of palm trees that separate 2 trees from another tree that you sold? What's the halacha here? Is that considered to be a hefsik, and therefore the buyer does not get karka? Teiku, this remains unresolved. Another shayla the Gemara says, Boy minei Hillel mi Rebbe. Hillel asked from Rebbe, from Rabbeinu HaKadosh, a law regarding this case of buying 3 trees, Erez beinehen. Let me read that again. The way you read this is, so Hillel asked from Rebbe, Allah erez beineyen mahu. What's if a cedar tree came out and grows now between the two trees and the 3rd tree? So what's the halacha here in this case? That cedar tree that's not growing here, is it a break? Is it a separation between the 2 trees and the other tree? So the Gemara clarifies the shaila. Allah, did he really ask this question that a cedar tree now grew here? It's mashma that he was asking that in the beginning, by the time of the sale, there was no cedar tree there. There were all 3 trees together. So if that's the case, definitely the buyer gets the karka as well. It's already in the rishus of the buyer that the cedar tree grew. What should be the shaila about this? Ella, rather, the question that he asked was, Hoya erez b'nei mahu. That if you sold 3 trees and between them there was a cedar tree, is that going to separate between the 2 trees and the other tree? Amalei, and Rebbe answered, Kana v'kana, it's not a separation. He will acquire the 3 trees with the karka and the cedar tree as well. It's all going to be his. Now going back to this halacha, another detail here.
Why is the cedar tree here? He only sold him the 3 trees.
True, he sold him only the 3 trees, but the halacha, when you sell 3 trees, even if you only specify that you're selling 3 trees, but those 3 trees includes the karka and any other trees that are in between, even if you didn't specify the 4th tree, if there's other trees in between, it's included in the sale. Now there's another detail here regarding these 3 trees. Keitzad heinoimdim. What is the position of these 3 trees that we say that if you buy them, you automatically receive karka as well? Rav says keshura, if there are 3 trees lined up in a straight line. The Rashbam here made the picture of this. And Shmuel says kechatsuva, even if it's set up like a chatzuva, which are like three legs of like a tripod, like a segel, as you have here in the picture of the Rashbam. So the Gemara explains what's the machlokes here. So Manda Makishura Rav that said that it's three trees that are lined up in a straight line. Kol sheken kechatzuva. Definitely, if they're lined up like a segel, it's going to be it's the halacha of you acquiring the trees along with the karka will apply. But Amanda Ama kechatzuva, Shmuel that said that it's the trees that are set up like a segel, Adol keshura. But if it's trees that are in three trees in a straight line, loy, so then you don't acquire any of the karka in between. My time, what's the reason? Why should this be different? Mishum de mizdara bin tayu, because since they're set up in one straight line, so then the owner of the karka that's selling you these trees can come there and he can plow. He's selling it specifically in a straight line because he wants to give himself the ability to come and plow in that area and keep it for himself and plant there. When you sell in a segel, so then, because the trees are set up that way, you can't come in between to plow over there. So that's why it's clear that he's selling the karka as well. Okay, so based on this, the Gemara asks, Maskef law of Amnuna. So the Amnuna asks, based on the opinion of Shmuel, that it's all based on this point, whether the seller will be able to come there and plow in between. The opinion that says that because it's being sold in this shape of a tripod, so you can't come and plant there in between. My time, what's the reason? The loy mizdara bin taya, so you can't plant there. Ela me'ata. If so, this halacha that when you acquire trees, you get the karka as well. It shouldn't be only regarding trees. Zav and leit klas higi rumaisa. What's if a person buys 3 bushes? Is that how they translate there? Higi, 3
Thorn bushes.
three thorn bushes, that is, and these are Roman thorn bushes. So it's not trees. It's 3 bushes. The loim is dara bin tayu. So because you're selling him these 3 bushes like a segel, so now the seller doesn't have space to come there in between them to go and plow there. So you should say also the halacha should apply that the buyer gets the karka as well. So why are we saying that this halacha applies only by trees? So he answered him and says, no, we don't apply this to bushes. Hanoch loy chshivi. Over here, the bushes, they're not choshev enough to say that you get karka. Hanoch chshivi, but the trees are choshev. So the point of here is that it has to be both. Side the fact that it's trees, and because they're choshev, it's an orchard, so therefore you acquire the karka, and it also has to be positioned as a segel, so he can't plow in between him, can't plant in between, so therefore it's clear that he means to sell him the karka as well. Okay, let's see the next Mishnah over here. A person that's selling parts of an animal, and he says that he's selling the head of a large animal. This is, let's say, from a bull, from a cow. So he's selling the roish of a behema gasa, then loy mocha saraglayim. So if the feet of the animal do not come along with the sale, each one is choshev for itself. So if you're selling the head, the legs don't come along. Macha saraglayim. On the other hand, if you're selling also that's a similar halacha. If you're selling the legs, loy mocha saroish, the head does not come along. Another halacha is similar, the different parts of the meat of the body of the animal that is being sold, mochar sakana. If you're selling the windpipe of the animal, mochar sakaved, so the liver is not sold with that. Mochar sakaved, if you're selling the liver, mochar sakana, then the windpipe does not come along. The Rashbam here says that this is all in a place where there's no minig, so this is the rule that we follow. But in the Braisa it says in a place that there's a minig, then you just go by what the minig is. If the minig is that it's sold together, so then it's going to be sold together. So this is all by behema gasa, large livestock. Avol behema, avol bedaka, that is. But if you're selling smaller animals from small livestock like a lamb and so on, then mocha saroish. If you sell the head, mocha saraglayim, the legs come along with the head. Mochas haraglayim, however, when you sell the legs, loy mochas haroish. The head does not come along with that because the roish is more chashuv than the legs. So therefore, if you're selling just the legs, the roish is separate. Similar, mochas sakona, by the small livestock, if you sell the windpipe, mochas sakove, the liver comes along. Mochas sakove, but if you're selling the liver, loy mochas sakona. So then the windpipe does not come along with it. Now here the Mishnah says another general halacha regarding a person selling something. Arba midos b'moichrin. There are 4 different possibilities in what happens when you sell something. 4 different halachas that would apply. Machalei chitin yafais, a person that sells wheat, and he says clearly that he's selling good quality wheat. V'nimtzu rois, and the buyer sees that he got a bad quality. So then in such a case, Halekeyach yochel achsabay, because the lekeach is the one that was deceived here. He didn't get what he was told he's getting, good quality, so he could retract from the sale. Rois v'nimtze yafais, if what the deal was that he's going to get bad quality, and it ends up being that he got good quality. So in this case, the seller can retract from the sale because that wasn't the deal of the sale. Now, if it was a case of rois v'nimtzu rois, that he said he's giving him bad quality, and he got bad quality, or yafais v'nimtzu yafais, or he says he's giving him good quality and he got good quality, then none of them could have charata from this. So the Rashbam explains here, what's the chiddush of this? It seems to be obvious. If that's what was said, and you didn't get what you were told, or sorry, you got exactly what you were told. You're gonna, whether bad quality or good quality. So why would you think that any of them could have charata? So the Rashbam says that based on the Gemara, that you could say that when a person says, "I'm ready to accept bad quality," it's just maybe a way of speaking, but not necessarily is the person really ready to accept bad quality. And the same thing also, Yafais. The Rashbam says, so let me just go back a second to the Rois, that the derech of a buyer is that when he buys, and he always complains to the seller, it's bad quality. So when the buyer says, I'm getting bad quality, you would think, he didn't necessarily mean that he's ready to accept bad quality. He's still complaining that he's getting bad quality. So that we say, no. If he said bad quality, that he's ready to take bad quality, that's what he gets. And the same thing by Yafais. You don't think that Yafais is just a seller that's saying, I'm giving you the best, and he doesn't really mean it. No, if he says, I'm giving you the best, good quality, it has to actually be good quality. Now, Shchamtis, V'nimtzis Levana, if you're selling the kernels of wheat that they're supposed to be reddish and they turn out to be whitish, different quality, or Levana, V'nimtzis Shchamtis, supposed to be white and it turns out to be red, or Eitzim Shalzayis, you're selling trees that they're supposed to be olive, v'nimtza shel shikma, and instead it's sycamore, or shel shikma v'nimtza shel zayis. So these are all things. It's not a matter of not one is better than the other, but for one person he needs this, he wants olives, another person wants sycamore, and you said one and it turns out to be another. Or yayin v'nimtza chaymitz, you said you're selling wine and it turns out to be vinegar, or chaymitz v'nimtza yayin, you said you're selling vinegar and it turns out to be wine. In such a case, this is the fourth example, shneim yichayil nachsabay. Both of them could have charata because both are on the buyer's behalf or on the seller's behalf. Either one of them could come and say that this is not what I wanted to sell, or this is not what I wanted to buy. It's not a matter of good or bad, but it depends. Each one needs something else, and therefore over here both of them could have charata from this kind of sale.